Good evening, everyone. This is the October 27th, 2025 meeting of the Town of Barnstable's Comprehensive Financial Advisory Committee. My name is Christopher Lozon. I'm the chair. In accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, any member of the public is welcome to record this meeting as long as they make themselves known. Would anyone like to do so? Seeing none, this is being recorded by the town for availability to the public as well. We'll start with a call to order. Jeremy?
Hector Gunther,
I'm here.
Tom Keene,
Here.
Chris King,
Here.
Chris Lozon,
Here.
Jim Sproul,
Present.
Frank Ward,
I'm here.
Lillian Wu,
Here.
and I am here.
All right. We're all here. I see Councilor Lucky joined us. Welcome, Betty. On to public comment. I know Mr. Schulte sent an email, which I believe he had sent to all of you, but I forwarded it anyway.
Thank you.
I don't believe there's any other members of the public here, so we'll move on from that. Approval of the minutes from our last meeting of October 14th. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. They were good as usual. Very comprehensive. Can we get a roll call vote to approve?
Certainly. Hector Gunther,
I approve.
Tom Keene,
Approve.
Chris King,
Abstain.
Chris Lozon,
Yes.
Jim Sproul,
Yes.
Frank Ward,
Yes.
Lillian Wu,
Yep.
and I am a yes as well.
All right, perfect. So right on to business, the final review of our financial overview report for fiscal 26. I want to make sure we have a final document done tonight. So there was at least one member who objected. So I don't know, Mark, if you can bring up that final version. And anyone who wants to speak out, feel free to do so.
So I saw a typo or an error early on page 4. No, hold on, I have to find it now. Somewhere in here, Tom, there's a reference to the Hyannis Youth Community Center. And there is there's an ampersand in the middle. It's Hyannis Youth and Community Center. It's on page 9, second paragraph. So it's just a typo.
Page 9.
Page 9.
Page 9's the fire district, I believe.
I guess I'm looking at the red line version.
Oh, I know. It must have been page 8.
Yeah, Enterprise
It's
Fund
Hyannis
section.
Youth and Community Center.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yep. But other than that, I didn't see any typos.
Okay.
And thanks to Frank for getting that additional info about the connection costs for the sewer. I think that's helpful to have that in there.
Indeed, it was.
There are some people that were as low as 2,000 to 3,000, but people are comfortable with that larger number.
Any other changes to content on this report from anyone?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I think that this is the most detailed financial review we've ever had. So it's just an extraordinary document. Also, thank Tom for his efforts to get all the figures, reformulation, and edit of this amazing document. So thank you, Tom. I have a comment, and I'd like to share some information with you, if I may.
Certainly.
I want to talk a little bit about CFAC. CFAC has its authority, comes from, and is limited by the town council through the administrative code. We are an advisory body that analyzes and reports on the town's operating, capital, and school budgets, and we provide independent financial guidance to the town manager and town council. CFAC has no power to enact policies or rules. The code permits new topics to be researched and discussed within the committee. The code does not let CFAC act independently beyond its scope. This boundary protects our credibility and ensures our analysis is factual, data-based, and within our charge. CFAC has responded to over 10 special requests from town council and town manager, such as 2 pilot reviews, the sewer trust fund, CWMP financial management plan, and the CWMP financial model. Each was formally requested and completed with full committee participation. The town council is already considering a wide range of long-range financial issues. For example, the OPEB funding, the Chapter 70 financial review formula, the Water Infrastructure Investment Fund, and many others. CFAC always welcomes the opportunity to work on any of these issues whenever we receive requests from either the town manager or the town council, while we are fulfilling our regular responsibilities of the OP and CIP. Part of our overview report for 2026 proposes the inclusion of zoning and offshore wind projects whose current status is unclear. CFAC has not received requests from either town council or town manager to review their financial impacts. Addressing them without clear direction risks overstepping our authority. And for these reasons, I make a motion that CFAC eliminate those 2 bullets from our fiscal 2026 financial overview report. This is to keep our work consistent, factual, and within the scope entrusted to us by the town council. So I make that motion.
Okay, motion has been made. Does anyone second that motion?
I'll second that motion so we can have a discussion.
Okay, let's discuss.
Hey, I have a couple of comments. Lillian is very fond of referring to the town chart, the administrative code, the CFAC charter, which is in accordance with the town of Barnstable charter, part 6, section 6-5 and chapter 241-18 of the administrative code. The statement's been made that this language limits us to the things that she mentioned. I would just challenge Lillian to show me where in this language, and it's all of about a half a page, it says that the CFAC shall not do anything but. And for example, under authorities and responsibilities, part B says we provide financial advice to the town council. That's number 1. Number 2, provide advice to the town council and town manager on matters of long-range financial planning. And number 3, we advise town council on the annual preparation of the town capital improvement plan, which includes a report on that program, and we participate in public hearings called for a review of the capital improvement program. But what the charter is very clear in not doing is saying that we the only things that we tackle are matters that are explicitly requested by town council or the town manager. It nowhere says that. So my reading of this charter is that we are an advisory committee, as Lillian said. We are not a regulatory committee. We don't make decisions. But by the same token, this language does not limit our purview. So if we want to, by way of example, write a section called Looking Ahead and give our views as to some of the challenges facing the town in the future, especially two of the biggest things to hit this town in the last 100 years, the sewer project and offshore wind infrastructure in our community. There's nowhere in this CFAC charter does it proscribe us from doing that. So for that reason, I would oppose the motion and would like other people's point of view on this.
I will just point out that the code does permit new topics to be researched and discussed within the committee, and we have done that in the past. CFAC has actually taken the initiative to do a couple of things. A number of years ago, one of our members decided that he wanted to look into the solid waste issue. And so, and he did the research on the single stream and the multiple stream, and it was all done internally with the advice and consent of CFAC, and it was found to be too expensive. Similarly, when we were working on the original CWMP, a couple of CFAC members initiated putting together a Q&A, which they did, and it came back to the committee. It was adopted, and it was approved by the senior management, and it was included in our annual review for 2 years. So we can do that, but it is within the committee. It is not one person or one committee going public without our doing any of the research or agreement of the whole committee. That's all I'm
Well,
saying.
well, that being said, we did agree to all of these bullet points at our last meeting. We took a vote and we agreed to the language, and it was submitted to Tom to write up with the changes we made at the last meeting to be approved via email. So all this
Well,
language on the bullet points was approved by the full committee at our last meeting. And we included a similar bullet point in last year's
well, that
report
was a
as well.
mistake last year.
Well, I
Well, that's
disagree.
your
I disagree it's a mistake. So, the zoning thing, I'm not really sure what your complaint is because we did just, at the behest of the town council, complete a report on the Wilkins 2 project, which involved
Well,
zoning issues and land use policy as a broader issue. And the wind farm, I mean, that's the logic you want to use, the bullet about the Federal Reserve Bank chairman should be eliminated. You know, the town council has not asked us to look at Barnstable Public Schools at all. That bullet point should be eliminated. All these things are about possible financial issues the town is facing in the future, not about specific items town council or town manager has asked us to look at. These are all
we have,
broader
we,
concerns.
all I'm saying is that we as a committee have not discussed either the offshore wind projects as a committee, and we have not discussed zoning and land use as a committee. We have not done any internal work on it, and no single member. This was introduced last year, and between last year and this year, um, we have CFAC as a committee has not been asked to do any research or delve into it, deep dive into any of these. And then all of a sudden it reappears again this year in the looking ahead. And I just think that we are overstepping ourselves here.
Okay, well,
You know,
read here.
there are so many huge issues.
Lillian, can other people talk,
Well,
please?
I want to get Jim to say something as his hand up.
Yeah,
All right.
thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And, as I mentioned last time, I don't fundamentally have an issue with the two topics that I think Hector had one and Bob Schulte was nice enough to raise another. That's really not where my thoughts were as I reconsidered my vote last week. It's really more of wanting to protect our credibility is kind of an odd word, but I mean, we're a unique group, and I think people that get along and enjoy doing good work for the town. And I want to continue those efforts. I don't want to have to believe that we have to have, there's a fine line between discussion and arguments, and we're bordering those the last couple of meetings. And I might recommend something is, why don't we take a step back and, codify this requirement and looking ahead, spend some time on it. But for this year, just remove it. And rather than have it cause a division between the group of us. So that's certainly all I was. I agree. I understand Hector's point of view. We can all argue until the cows come home on whether or not it's a financial impact of the town at this point. But you listen to speakers who are knowledgeable about it, they're very cautious about wanting to drop away from this. And the same way in listening to Bob Schulte present his case on zoning, he's a good guy and really works hard for the town. So he's got credible points to talk about. But it just looks to me to be outside of what we're supposed to be doing with our charter. And I would highly recommend, rather than say what point is right or what point is wrong, is maybe just for this year, Mr. Chair, take a step back and just not include that until we can get our heads wrapped around about what's important to the committee.
So my
I
question, Jim, is
appreciate
how
your
is it outside the charter? I went through the various my quick analysis of the charter. You're welcome to boot it up and take a look at it, but nowhere in the charter does it say that we can't as a group. And so we're talking about voting on this. Lillian's made a motion, and there'll be a vote eventually. But as I said last week, the point of the looking ahead section is to give our summary view of some of the big issues facing the town. And there's nothing in the charter that proscribes us from doing that, even on topics where we haven't been formally asked by town council or town manager to study, quote unquote. So
I agree. The
it's
looking ahead section, we're not offering any opinion or study or viewpoint on those subjects. It's strictly these are potential long-term financial impacts the town needs to take a look at, whether positive or negative. We're not taking a position on any one of them.
It doesn't
On
have to be
zoning or on
it doesn't
anything.
have to be financial. In other words, Bob's comments were purely not financial related at all. They were opinion on policy, right? So,
Right. So that was his public comment, but
right,
there's no doubt that zoning and land use policy has a major fiscal impact on the
right,
town.
right.
So again, we're not taking a position or offering analysis, but that is a discussion that's happening in town right now about how best to use our land resources,
Gotcha.
especially in Hyannis, at least from what I've seen. Um,
You know,
Frank, do you have comments you want to offer?
I do, Chris. Thank you. I mean, as the newest member, when I researched wanting to join this committee, my reading of what it could do was limitless. Anything to do with finance, it's not limited in any way. Maybe it has been in the past, but I don't think it should be. And each one of these topics that we're now about to vote on, they absolutely have future long-term financial impact. So I agree with you, Chris, that we shouldn't be limited. We're not opining. And I'm confident that in the future, I'll have topics in here that we will not have discussed, but might be my opinion that they should be included. I think they absolutely should be included, and we can vote on it. We're not always going to agree. That's why we have votes.
yes, I'm not saying that these are not worthy, but the town council is also looking at some really big issues.
So include more.
You know,
If you have more topics, include more. Let's not
no,
take them out. Put more in. These are absolutely long-term financial topics. There's no doubt about that.
So we
And
have,
Lil,
That's my
we
opinion.
actually, we now have before us a motion that has been made and seconded. And Jim came up with the idea that if this motion fails, that he has another motion to just eliminate the looking ahead this year until we can regroup ourselves. So
so Jim
Well,
hasn't made a motion
I
yet,
haven't
so
made a
let's
motion,
do
but
let's
it's a,
worry about
one
this
motion at a
one
time.
motion
but
first.
we
Is
only
there more?
have one, we
Is there
only
any
have
more?
one motion.
Is there more discussion on Lillian's motion at this point? Chris?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, thank you. I look at all of the items on the looking ahead. Some of them we've looked at as a committee and have delved into and produced reports. Some of them we have not. But each of them are an issue. And if you read the last sentence of looking ahead, it says that, let me just read it. It says CFAC stands ready to provide advice to ensure that policy decisions do not place undue strain on the town's budget or its taxpayers. In other words, these issues that we're talking about, we stand ready to be able to dive into and take a look at if the town wants us to do that. And we're presenting this to the public so that the public can then urge the town onto giving us direction as to what to look at. And to Frank's point, we could add all of the items that are there. These are the ones that were voted on. I wasn't here. I apologize. I was not available. But these are the ones that were voted on and agreed to last time. We say in here that we stand ready to provide advice to ensure that the policy decisions and blah, 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 that the town budgets for its taxpayers. I think we say we're ready to support and analyze.
I
I'm
agree.
curious to know if Jeremy or Tom have any thoughts on this.
Well, I
So-
think last week Jim
Right.
brought up the issue of the CWMP funding model, which talks about offshore wind. So we have looked at a piece of this story, and I think it's natural to include that piece. Like we spent a lot of time, as Jim had mentioned, talking about this. And if that wasn't about offshore wind, and maybe we're not looking at project details, but we're certainly looking at the financial impact on CWMP. And with zoning too. I mean, that's it. We just had a presentation from Mark the last meeting about if we're going to be seeing positive financial means for this town coming in, we need to see growth, and that's also naturally something that I think should be included. So I agree. We are. I'll be honest. After Mark's presentation last time, like I am going out talking to people, being like, "Hey, you really need to pay attention to what's happening." Like I, as a committee member, like there's a lot going on, and I think. I want us to be more forceful of saying, like, listen to the community. There's a lot that's coming up and it needs your attention. Like, if that's not our job, other than to advise the people that are governing this town, which is the people. Yes, it's town council, but it is the voters we need to help. Like, what are we doing? So yeah, let's keep it in. I fully support not excluding this.
Okay. I see your hand, Betty. Just let me ask Tom, although Betty just dropped, I guess. But Tom, do you have any comments?
I do. I, I hear both Jeremy and Jim in terms of their arguments. One of the things that has really bothered me is that particularly this year, we seem to have become more politicized and dragged into what are political battles rather than just financial analysis. We all agreed, and I wrote and I think faithfully transcribed what was agreed upon at our last meeting, which, as Jeremy notes, are really just saying, here's a red flag or a yellow flag, just be aware. On the other hand, I really don't like the fact that we have become divided and politicized. And to that degree, I would be more sympathetic to Jim's thought about maybe don't do the looking ahead section until we can really figure out what it is we want to do here um, uh, as an organization. And if we aren't going to do it this time, I really think that next time this ought to be front and center. It's not just people dropping in something they care about it. It should be the voice, and I would hope the unanimous voice of the entire committee.
Yeah, so I think it seems more politicized maybe because we've been getting more public comment, I guess, in the past few months. I think some issues like the apartments, Wilkins Lane, they're inherently political because people are very passionate about it on either side. But for us, I think the looking ahead section is very powerful and very important to kind of just show some of the challenges that the town maybe hasn't fully addressed or maybe hasn't fully considered, but are still looming on the horizon, and we do need to address those things. So it's not about politicizing it in my mind, just about identifying these issues. And maybe you think, again, with wind, you can think it's the greatest thing
Yeah,
in the world, or you can think it's terrible. Doesn't matter. It's a financial issue for the town either way. So
Yeah,
right. And I,
my
I
I
whole
say,
thought
point
the
on
way,
looking ahead.
yeah,
But
if I can, and I
guys,
really thought the way that that bullet was crafted was to not take a position on it, but simply to identify it.
right.
But I'm,
Yeah,
Right.
no,
I'm
I thought we came up with good language for that.
Yeah.
yeah,
So
hi guys.
Betty, can you
Yeah, sorry,
weigh in?
I've
Yep.
been driving in my car. I have no heat. I have no hot water. I'm kind of in a crisis. But anyways, I just wanted to comment. I think these two topics are very important. I fully understand what Lillian's saying, and I completely agree. You have not done the analysis required for either one of these because you haven't been asked to and it hasn't been done. But let's step back a little bit. I know we have some new folks here. If those of us who remember the Avangrid ads, they were all over the radio waves and came in our mailboxes that they were basically funding the sewer. I don't. Some of you may remember that it was really bad, and our citizens, our residents, were very confused, and there was a lot of uproar. So we do need some analysis to understand that. They were making that claim, and we ought to have some good data to show what the reality is. So that one, and then the town council, the DCPC has been considered, and you saw the Home Builders Association come in, and there was a DCPC years ago, and the home builders sued the town. And first they won, and then they lost in the appeal. And a lot of this, it has to do with finance. I mean, people say you're going to wreck the town. Okay, so these are two huge issues. And the DCPC is coming up because the zoning is so egregious. I'll say it. I've said it publicly. I think this zoning downtown has been a disaster. And then as soon as anyone raises their hand to say we should touch it, everybody comes out of the woodwork. It's economic disaster. So I absolutely support these issues. They can be political. The analysis hasn't been done, but looking forward, some analysis ought to be done. Okay, that's it. Bye.
I appreciate that, Betty. Thank you.
I'd like to follow up Betty because she's exactly right. There are so many huge issues that the town council is dealing with. And to pick up on Tom's point that a couple of members have dropped in their specific interests, but I think the town council should determine because those issues are so big. The Municipal Empowerment Act, for example, is huge. The DCPC is huge. The Chapter 70 financial formula review is huge. Workmen's compensation and benefits are huge. WIF is huge. Now, we can pull it all back and just put them all in there, but I think that we should, which one would the town council like CFAC to research and analyze? If Betty is correct, then town council should ask us to look at the wind farms, or it should look at DCPC or whatever. But we ourselves cannot just pick it
Why can't we?
is what
Well,
I'm
you
saying.
you've
Why
said
can't
it's
we?
happened in the past anyway, Lillian, but
And then, and there's
that's separate from our discussion here anyway. If
and,
we
Can I
and the
take it
call
up
the
as
charter.
question? Can I call the
issue.
motion? Can we?
Yeah, can we
Yes,
hold
rather than
on
get
the
it,
motion unless we
you can
have,
call the motion.
yeah,
please.
let's have a roll call vote on the motion, please. This is to remove the bullet points on offshore wind and zoning from looking ahead. So
So we're voting to remove.
a yes vote will remove them, a
Gotcha.
no vote
Thank
will
you.
retain them.
Hector Gunther,
No,
Tom Keen,
I'm going to abstain since, quite frankly, I drafted those. So
Chris King,
No.
Chris Lauzon,
No.
Jim Sproul,
Yes.
Frank Ward,
No.
Lillian Wu,
Yes,
and I am a no.
so what's the final vote?
So that's 5 no, 2 yes, and an abstention. So I would say no prevails and the bullet points remain. Okay. So
if I could just add, I really do hope, Mr. Chairman, that we can start to bring about some sense of unanimity on this in the future. Because I don't like the fact that I don't think I've seen a split vote on anything before except who we elect, but
But
I would agree with that. I don't think we should have a split on this at all. And I'm kind of surprised because we did agree on all this language at the last meeting. So I'm a little surprised this motion even came up. But
well, we
is
left it
there...
open for people to object. So
Correct. But we did vote on the language
Move on,
that was
Chris.
put
We're
in.
done. Let's
Anyway.
move on.
Yeah.
can I
Yeah,
just
I'm moving on. Is there any more discussion on
actually
the
I do
report?
just so the motion has failed. I'm going to make that a change that that Hector had pointed out in terms of the ampersand. But aside from that,
Mhm.
I will submit it. I will submit it to Mark and to and
well,
we'll
should we?
go on
Well,
this.
we still need to vote on the final document. So is there
I
any
think
more
so.
discussion on the document itself?
Right.
Yeah. So I
That's
move that we add the ampersand. Okay, sorry.
I would entertain a motion to approve the report.
Second,
I move.
Okay, moved and seconded. Can we get a roll call?
Hector Gunther,
I approve it.
Tom Keen,
Yes.
Chris King,
Yes.
Chris Lauzon,
Yes.
Jim Sproul,
Yes.
Frank Ward,
Yes.
Lillian Wu,
yes.
and I am a yes.
Okay, report is done. So moving on. Mark, you have a review on the fiscal 26 tax levy options?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Here's my screen here. So we provided this presentation to the town council last Thursday night in anticipation of the 2 annual upcoming votes on shifting the tax levy between and within tax classes. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay. Start this presentation. So fiscal year 2026 tax rate comes out to $5.96 per $1,000 of valuation, and it's a simple equation. Pardon me? Can you see this okay?
Perfectly.
Yes.
So it's a simple calculation of just dividing the total assessed value, 26 billion, into what our tax levy is that we use to balance the budget of 156 million. And that's how we arrive at the $5.96. This is the rate before any tax levy shifting options are approved. You should note that this is less than what the tax rate is in fiscal year 2025, and the reason why is the total assessed value for the town's property went up by about 5.8%, but the tax levy went up about 3.5%. And so the denominator grew at a faster rate than the numerator here, which results in a reduction in the tax rate. Here's the breakdown by class of property. This is how the tax levy gets distributed. It's distributed amongst these 4 different classes of property based on their percentage of the overall valuation. No surprises here. Residential has always been close to 90% of the total town's property value. So it pays about 90% of that $156 million tax levy for fiscal year 26. And the commercial, industrial, and personal property classes make up the other 10%. So the first item before the town council is decide whether or not to adopt what's commonly referred to as a split tax rate. The split tax rate, what this does is it shifts more of that residential levy of $140 million over to the CIP classes of property to provide some residential tax relief. And you typically see communities with a much larger percentage CIP property as a percentage of their overall valuation utilize this tool to provide their residential taxpayers some financial relief. But in our case, it's because of our large percentage of residential property making a portion of our overall assessed value. There's very little tax relief that you can provide to the residential taxpayers without correspondingly negatively impacting the CIP class taxpayers dramatically. And this shows you at each 5% shift approximately what the levies would be between those 2 classes. So we can shift a total of about $8 million if we went to a full 1.5 shift, which is the maximum that we could do under the law. It shifts about $8 million, and that would increase the CIP rate from 596 to 894, but only decrease the residential rate from 596 to 563.
Excuse me, Mark, if I may, a quick question. Are short-term rentals considered residential or commercial?
Residential. They're classified as residential under Mass state law because they could sell tomorrow and somebody could end up being living there. They're residential property under the law's definition. We can't classify them as commercial properties.
Interesting. Thank you.
Even if they were 100% used for rental.
Yes. All of our apartment complexes, are people who have rental properties, duplexes, the smaller, 8, 10 unit rental properties like you see down in Hyannis area. Those are all classified as residential property, not commercial property.
But larger apartment buildings are classified as CIP.
No, they are classified as residential as well. Wilkins,
Really?
residential.
Really?
Yeah.
That's some great lobbying.
People are living there. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, have bathrooms, bedrooms, kitchens. So they're considered residential.
Wow.
So here's an illustration of what the tax bills would look like using the median residential assessed value for fiscal year 26, which is $633,000. The tax savings is for residential properties illustrated by the blue line. You can see that doesn't waver much. It doesn't go down much, while the orange line illustrates what the impact would be on a commercial, industrial, or personal property taxpayer. And you can see how dramatically that increases for each one of these shifts. So it's only been adopted by the town of Barnstable once back in 2007. I think a shift of 1.15 was adopted, and then they immediately turned it back to a factor of 1 the following year. And that's the only time in the history of the town of Barnstable since the implementation of Proposition 2.5 that the council actually did it, voted a shift. The second item before the council, of course, is the residential exemption, which I think you're all familiar with. And this can be as high as 35% currently. There's an act out there called the Seasonal Communities Act, which allows communities designated as seasonal communities to increase this to 50%. Barnstable has not been designated as a seasonal community yet. The state is working on issuing their guidance as to how to become a seasonal community. We expect that guidance to be out by the end of December. And then we'll determine whether or not the town of Barnstable can become a seasonal community, or wants to become a seasonal community if it does qualify. But that's one change here that could happen to the residential exemption if that does come to fruition. The property must be the primary residence of the homeowner, used for your income tax filing purposes, and you must have owned the property as of January 1, 2025 to be eligible for the residential exemption for fiscal year 26. This option only shifts taxes within the residential class. It doesn't impact the CIP tax payers. So this is just taking that $140 million residential levy and making higher valued properties pay more, as well as second homeowners pay more. There's 20 communities in Massachusetts that currently adopted it for 25. I don't know how many for 26 yet, because 26, of course, is underway. But we did have, I think that's up from 2. We had 18 the year before. There's 2 more have joined the residential exemption list. I think Eastham was 1. Maybe West Tisbury was the other, the 2 at the very bottom. But and the table over to the right shows you what the communities that have adopted it and what their current percentages were for fiscal year 25.
Mark, if I may, so
yeah.
In order to get the residential exemption, it has to be your primary residence.
That's
so
correct.
It could be my primary residence, and then I vacated in the summer for short-term rentals, and I still get the residential exemption?
Mm-hmm.
So not only is it not commercial, it could potentially still get a residential exemption, and I'm renting it a good portion of the year.
You're filing your income taxes, but the only qualification we have that you have to meet is that you provide us a copy of the income tax return that you use. And where you if you're filing your income taxes from that location, then you will qualify for the residential exemption, even if you rent it out for 8 weeks during the summer, let's say.
Thank you. Interesting.
This option reduces the taxable assessed value for each qualifying primary residence. So you get a deduction off of your assessed value subject to taxation before the tax bill is calculated. And we have about 10,922 properties currently qualifying. That changes almost every day. As property transfers take place, we immediately remove the residential exemption qualification from the property and ask the new homeowner to certify that this is going to be their primary residence. So that number is changing all the time. Of course, people who stop using Barnstable as their primary residence, they don't tell us this. So we have a recertification process that we do where we try to get to ask every property owner who currently qualifies to re-qualify once every 5 years. So you may have gotten a questionnaire in the mail at some point in time from our assessing operations asking you to resubmit qualifying documentation and certify that you still qualify. Because people aren't going to remember to tell us they no longer qualify. So the result of the adoption would be a higher tax rate for all residential properties because we are deducting billions of dollars from taxation. And I'll show you how that calculation works. We take the total residential value of 23.5 billion and divide it by the number of residential parcels, which is 25,713, and that gives us an average residential value of $916,000. That's what we use to determine, we use that as the factor for applying the current residential exemption percentage. And so if it was to be approved at 25% again, 25% of that 916 is $229,000, and that's what the exemption value would be worth in FY26. 10,922 parcels qualify would be removing $2.5 billion of property value from taxation, but we're still raising the same amount of tax levy for a residential class, 140 million. So the tax rate has to go up in order to collect $140 million. And here's how that's determined. So we end up reducing the taxable residential value from 23.5 billion to 21,067 million. Divide that into tax levy 140 million, and the tax rate ends up being 667 for the residential class, which is more than the single tax rate of 596. And this chart illustrates the difference between tax bills if we had no exemption at all, if the council were to eliminate the exemption. The tax bills at each one of these levels are represented by the blue bar. And then if the council were to reauthorize, let's say, a 25% exemption, the tax bill here is represented by the orange bar. And you can see the tax savings is the greatest for lower valued properties. And eventually that tax savings disappears when you hit the $2,158,000 threshold. A property assessed at that value would pay the same amount of taxes if they qualified for a 25% residential exemption and versus no exemption in existence. And so there's no tax savings for anybody valued at that level or higher. So for example, somebody in an assessed valuation of $2,500,000, you can see the orange bar is more than the blue bar. They start paying more taxes at above that 2.158 threshold because of the increase in the tax rate. And so this is a very progressive taxation policy allowed by Massachusetts to shift more property taxes onto higher valued homes and homes that are not the primary homes of residents. However, it's still beneficial to a primary homeowner who has a high valued property to file for the residential exemption, because that's illustrated by the difference between the gray bar and the orange bar. So if you take a $2.75 million residential property, and if they qualified for the residential exemption, their tax bill would be $1,529,000 less than if they didn't submit their qualifying documentation, which is illustrated by the gray bar. That's the difference between the gray bar and the orange bar. And at every single value, that difference is the same. It's because the value of the exemption is $1,529. Those are the two items before the town council. We are in a recertification year. Once every 5 years, we have to do a comprehensive revaluation of the town's property values. It requires a lot more statistical analysis, a lot more documentation to be submitted to the State Department of Revenue for their review. We have completed all of that work, submitted it to the state for their review. It's currently under their review. They've had it for a couple of weeks, or more than a couple of weeks now. We're waiting to hear back from them. And once we do, the process is they provide us what's called preliminary certification. And being a reval year, you have to, once you receive your preliminary certification, you have to give a 5 days public notice to everybody that here's your preliminary assessed value for this coming tax year. Take a look at it. If there's a glaring issue or something wrong with it, say you remove the pool, but we still have the pool on there, you can let the assessing operations know and they'll adjust the assessed value before we receive our final certification. Typically, we don't get anything during that 5 day public notice process because the abatement process still exists. So if there's a mistake, you can catch it during the abatement process where you have more time to review things than just this 5 day public notice. I think it's more, the state just intends it to be a courtesy notice and to fix any glaring issues that may be out there before they provide us their final certification. I think we had 5 adjustments out of almost 30,000 parcels last time we had a recertification. Wow. So it's not the tool to provide assessed valuation relief to a homeowner. It's really the abatement process provides that, but this is just recertification. A lot of things can happen because you're doing major overhaul of your tables that drive the valuation calculations for assessments. And if you make, a mistake in one of those tables that significantly impacts a lot of things, you're back to square one, well, not square one, but you're reanalyzing things, and you're not going to get your certification from the state until that's all fixed. So it provides another layer of another review process from the public's perspective an opportunity to make sure that we got things right. So we'll, if we don't receive the certification from, or the preliminary certification from the state in time to provide that 5-day public notice, the council won't be able to act on these items at their November 6th town council meeting, and we would just postpone them to the November 20th meeting. But we would like to get the current council to vote on these items. They're familiar with them. They've approved the 26 adopted budget, and not place that kind of decision making. Not that they're incapable of doing so, but trying not to. It's kind of like trial by fire for our new counselors come the November 20th meeting if we have these items before them for the first time, and they may not be ready to vote on those. And we need timely approval of these items in order to print tax bills, because every community is going through this process right now, and they'll be getting their tax bill files up to the printers, and there's a limited number of printers who do this work, and we have to get the bills out by the end of December. And so we're hoping we sped things up this year. This is the earliest we've been before the council for a number of years. We typically don't bring this stuff before them until December, but we're ahead this year. We wanted to be ahead purposefully because of the potential change in council makeup, and being a revaluation year, we wanted to make sure we got it right. So happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mark, I have a question about the SALT deduction. If I own a second home, say my primary home, I pay $30,000 in property taxes, and my second home, I pay $10,000. Can I deduct that second 10,000 up to the limit of 40,000? Do you happen to know? Or is the SALT deduction for for property taxes only applicable to one's primary residence?
I'm by no means a income tax expert, but I believe the SALT deduction does allow for
Okay,
property taxes, your income tax, your state income
right,
taxes.
right.
In Massachusetts, I think motor vehicle excise you're allowed to throw in there as
Right,
well.
right.
But
Tom, do you know, you spend a lot of time in Washington. Do you know offhand?
The rules are changing so quickly, Hector, but
Yeah,
I think Mark's right.
yeah.
I
That's
think
my sense too.
if you own a second home, I don't think you get to add that to your SALT deduction either. But
Yeah.
don't quote me. Go talk to your tax accountant.
Yeah.
That's more of an operating expense of perhaps if you're renting that out. I don't know if you're renting it or not.
Right, right,
I was
right.
I was struck by two things from your presentation, Mark. One of which I think I already mentioned to you, and that is the dramatic difference between the average price of homes at 900K and the median price at 600. And I actually took a look at the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the average and the median are about the same.
Yep.
And so one of the striking things about that is that what that really means is that we have a lot of incredibly expensive properties in Barnstable that push up the average there. And then the other thing I was just struck by is 25,000 residential properties, and 10 of them are year-round properties, which means
50-50. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are a seasonal community, so that would make
Well,
sense, right?
not under the definition of seasonal community. We don't know what their definition is yet. It's interesting. They designated certain communities automatically as seasonal.
Yeah. So I'm saying seasonal and lowercase s, you know, but I think, Tom, what you're pointing out, which is accurate, it makes sense because of the fact that a lot of people here use their home as a second home, and that they have the funds to stump up for a larger residence. So that makes sense. I spoke about this to town council a couple of years ago in a personal capacity. I like the progressive nature of this exemption mechanic. And I think if we, if one believes that we need more workforce housing and indeed more year-round residents, I think one way to incent people is to give them a break on their taxes to live around here so I think the progressivity of this mechanic is a good thing. You may recall that I spoke in favor of increasing the exemption in 2023, 2 years ago, to 35%. And the town council to 30%, and the town council backed off. They wanted to retain some dry powder in the case of an upcoming debt exclusion. So that's how the town council arrived at the current level. Anyway, I think it's a good thing as a matter of policy.
Hey, Mark, Chris here. Thanks for sharing the report. I just had a quick question about, and I might have missed it in the early slides that you had shown, is what's the growth rate of the residential from year on year, and what's the growth rate of commercial CIP year on year? Is it the same?
No, well, what we've seen a gradual shift of more of the tax levy going to the residential class because it's picking up a higher and higher percentage of the overall levy. Because, well, since COVID, what's really happened is residential properties have skyrocketed in value. And so what used to be about 87% is closer to 90% now. So there's been a natural shift of about 3% of the levy from the CIP class. CIP has gone up too, but not as dramatically. But there's been a natural shift of about 3% of the levy to the residential class, just from the growth in the value of that class, in addition to the growth in the levy, which is about 3.5% a year. And so that has placed more of a burden on the residential class, but you can adjust for that by shifting, some of it to using the residential exemption. You could also adopt a policy that says, hey, we want to keep a consistent 85-15 shift of the levy to the residential and the CIP class. And you want that to stay the same every single year, regardless of the growth in value of those classes. Do that using the tax shifting option. But it has a significant impact on our small commercial owners. We have a lot of small commercial owners, businesses in the town of Barnstable, just by the nature of our economy. And, that would have a significant impact on them. And they show up, they have shown up in the past every year on that item, and commented to the town council to keep it a factor of one, do not do any shifting. And, I suspect they might be there again this year, but they used to come out and force a lot more than they have the past few years.
Okay. And then the other was, I looked into tax rates across Barnstable County, and Chatham has the lowest tax rate. And it's because they don't have a reduction for year-round residents. They don't have that. And the value of their homes have, gone way up also. So they've eliminated or don't have the reduction for full-time residents, and as a result, everybody gets a lower tax rate. Those that stay, as well as those that are just, seasonal homeowners. So I just thought I'd bring that up. I thought that was interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Sandwich has the highest tax rate on
yes,
and I think it's. I don't know. I'm not sure what their makeup is, but they're predominantly a residential community. They don't have any commercial or industrial property. Very little.
Right.
Well, it used to be a lower tax rate, but then that utility won its court case, and they had to shift a lot of the tax burden onto the residential class. Isn't that true? When was that, Mark? 20 years ago or something like that?
I'm not familiar with that one. I know Plymouth experienced that when the nuclear power plant was shut
Right.
down. It was the largest single taxpayer in the town of Plymouth was the nuclear
Right.
power plant. And then when that
Well,
got shut down, all that tax levy got shifted to everybody else.
right. In Sandwich, it was the canal
Is it the
power
Canal
plant.
Power Plant? Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was just some facts that I had in my head. Thank you.
Excellent. Any other comments?
One question, if I could, I want to be certain I have the numbers correct. So there's roughly 25,000 parcels in Barnstable, 10,000 of which get the residential exemption. So there's 15,000 parcels that are either second homes or short-term rentals or businesses, if you will, paying
Or
the
don't
residential.
apply.
Or don't apply. If they don't apply, it's a mistake that they just haven't figured out yet.
Right.
Yeah, and
potentially 50.
there's probably several that receive it that shouldn't get it. And, we put in mechanisms in place to try to catch those people by having them recertify once every 5 years.
In that
Not
recertification,
perfect.
do they have to send you something or just say,
Yeah, we
there's a
asked for,
documentation versus just saying my septic system used to be 5 bedrooms and all you have to do is swear to it?
no,
No.
for recertification, to qualify for the residential exemption, we require a copy of your federal tax return, proving that you file your tax returns from your Barnstable location. And
Thank
so,
you.
and that's what we ask when we recertify people, is to provide us a copy of their federal tax filing. Of course, social security numbers redacted, so forth. So we don't want that information, but that's not perfect either. Somebody could give us a bogus 1040.
I agree.
That's all we can do, though. We're hands are tied, and we can't go out and verify that they're actually filing their taxes from that location.
But I would think compliance is pretty high with the requirements. I don't think there are a lot of bogus tax returns submitted to the town. I'd be surprised.
Well, I know a number of firms with a work from home issue and people working multiple jobs. The solution is the company is saying, we'll do your tax return. So therefore, all your W-2s have to be shown to them. And you find out the person's working 3 full-time jobs from home. That's coming in the world because people are working multiple jobs.
Well,
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
So this strikes me as a topic that in the future CFAC should take a look at and weigh in on. Mark's got all the data, and this could potentially be a topic that we would look at. So I just put that out there.
Yeah, I certainly think we could if the council wants us to. So
That's
any
certainly
other-
something I could also recommend, like similar to what we did with the CWMP funding model. When we presented that to the town council, we made a recommendation of referring it back to this committee for your review and input. And this is certainly something we could do in the future as well. And I think to the point of your conversation earlier this evening, that's typically what we've done is we've tried to get the committee to identify the topics that you think would be beneficial for you to look into, take a deeper dive into, when we make that request of the town council to have this committee take a look at those issues. We want to make sure that the committee's not doing something that they don't value. And so that's why we've always tried to get the council's direction when taking a deep dive into an issue, whether it be, as Lillian brought up, the solid waste issue. They requested the committee to take a look at that. They requested the committee to take a look at funding the comprehensive wastewater management plan over 10 years ago. And So there are opportunities there for us to make suggestions to the council. Hey, these are the issues we think are, most immediate, short-term, long-term financial impacts. We'd be glad, as the last statement in your report states, as Chris brought up, be glad to take a deep dive into any one of these issues that you want us to. And so we can make some recommendations to them along those lines. Just don't want to go off on a topic that they do not want us touching. Like we had several years ago when we brought up the Kmart land leases. The committee started asking a lot of questions. They wanted copies of those lease agreements, and we weren't really asked to do anything about that. And we had the president of the council at the time come in and shut us down, and asked us to stop doing that, because they had a plan. They were taking it in a specific direction that they wanted, and didn't ask us to participate in that. So I just caution us to think about in those terms, where can we be most effective and useful for our town manager and town council, and which particular topics do you think that we could immediately address that would be helpful for them? And I think, this issue, funding, long-term funding of the CWMP with a debt exclusion override, perhaps with mitigating the tax impact by increasing the residential exemption gradually, is something I'd like to bounce off of you folks to make sure that I'm thinking about it right. So.
Yeah, no, I know we'd be happy to take that up if you want to mention that to the town council. We would be happy to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate those comments, Mark. Any other discussion?
That was a good
General,
presentation.
on the topic or in general?
On this topic.
Okay.
Hearing none, we can move on to correspondence from committee members. If you have anything else you want to say, Jim?
Yeah, I just want to, I'm sincere about this, I can appreciate the conversation we had earlier. Everyone has different points of view, which makes the world go round and more interesting than not. So I get that. What I'd like to suggest, though, is my personality, I read the code that Hector and Frank spoke about. I got a little bit different take on it. I thought there should be a little more rule following, but I'm happy to adjust my thoughts on any topic. So I just, from my perspective, I'd like to either have a single subject meeting on this, because once we gain momentum into we can talk about whatever we'd like to talk about, there's really no corralling that. Once it's out of the barn, it's hard to bring it back in. So I'm just asking for a little guidance on what we think the code actually means. And if I'm off base by thinking that, hey, this is what they're telling us to do, this is what we have to do, and I need to adjust, then I'm happy to adjust. But that's my reading, and my comments this morning were based solely on what I thought I read. So if, again, I just want to speak from the heart on that topic, and hopefully we can all kind of agree on what those rules mean, so we don't get in, off topic, if you will. So I'll just comments. I'm not asking for any guidance or whatever, but I just think it's important.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to jump in and echo what Jim said. Our previous conversation was not personal. It was just merely, as Jim pointed out, we wanted to keep our work consistent. And all of these issues are relevant because they all have long-term impacts on the budget. So I think we as a committee can decide what issue we feel what we can tackle, that we have some legs on, or that we are most interested in, or we have identified as being big issues for the future, and we can decide. And I think Jim's idea is right. We perhaps could have a meeting and just toss around all of the big issues that the town council is dealing with, and say, okay, CFAC, what issue are we most able to deal with? And I think, and then we can ask town council, we're thinking about this. Would you like us to pursue it? So I'm with that.
I think that's well said. But when I review the charter, I look at the section that says that it doesn't, as I said earlier, it doesn't prescribe anything. And there is a section that says CFAC provides financial advice to town council and town manager on matters of long-range financial planning. I think, as Frank said, that's a fairly open-ended topic.
That's
So
that is
I
and that,
think, Lillian, if I could finish, please. So the inference I take away from that is, and I agree with everything that Mark has said about, not getting out of our lane, so to speak, but I think we have the ability to raise topics and bring them to town council and say, we think this is important, and if you'd like us to dive in, we're happy to do that. But I don't see the charter as being overly prescriptive.
I agree with you, Hector. The charter permits us to have to come up with new topics to be researched, but within the confines of our committee. And that's all I'm saying.
Mhm.
We can do that. The code says we can do that.
Okay, so at this point, would the committee like to put on the agenda for our next meeting or a subsequent meeting a topic to discuss which issue we would like to pursue or request that the council ask us to pursue, whatever they feel is most important? I mean, the problem being now, it's kind of conflicting with saying you don't want individuals suggesting certain things, but now you want to have a discussion about what we feel is the most important without direction from the council. You want the committee to come up with ideas of what we should do and present that to the council, if I'm understanding you correct.
But that you are correct. But what I'm saying is that, Chris, if you came up with an issue, for example,
Yeah.
that you felt was very important, such as compensation and housing as an impediment for employment, we can say that. Any member can come up with an issue for all of us to discuss and say, okay, do we, through our work before, do we think we should dig deeper into it? I think you raised a very good issue when you did the police, because that's not going to end anytime soon.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I
my,
guess I'm just confused with the dispute earlier since and I don't want to rehash any of this. So does the committee want to have a topic of discussion to just try to determine a topic for us to create a report on? Is that what I'm hearing? Some kind of
So
major issue for the town?
What I'm saying is that each one of us each one of us has some kind of issue that we think is important. So we can all toss it out and just have at it.
I
think
think
we agree.
as a related matter, I think, there's been a number of mentions by me and others about the charter that we operate under. And it strikes me that, without getting legalistic about it, the charter, the language from the charter was most recently amended over 30 years ago. I would personally like some, maybe it's legal advice, to confirm the inference I take, which is that we have a fairly wide open remit to tackle different things. So Chris, I would just put forward, and I don't think there's any particular urgency to it. You know, if we could get during the meeting, get some advice, you know, from maybe Karen Nober, town attorney, about, you know, how she reads the charter for CFAC. So just get more certainty around that.
Can we just, if this group agrees that we can address or at least discuss any topic, that's either a yes or a no. Either we agree on that or we don't. Getting a legal opinion is just mucking the waters in my mind.
Well,
I think Jim's point was, do we have an open-ended charter or not? And I think let's discuss that. And if we don't, then we can talk about that. But I think most of us would agree when we read this, it is open-ended. It might not have been for the last 10 or 15 years, but I think it could be.
yeah. Mark, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. It is open-ended the way it's read. It's because it says any matter that has a long-range financial impact on the town of Barnstable. So that could be
Right.
anything. That could be anything.
Yeah, so Chris, what
Getting
I would
4 pages, but I'm just trying to caution you, you know, if you're gonna tackle an issue, be sure that the town council values what you're doing and wants you to do that. Don't go up and do something that's gonna come back and bite you.
We agree. We agree.
So Chris, I would recommend that, you know, we make a list of items that we think are important for us to tackle and provide that to the town council. This is what we can do. What would you like us to focus on?
Right, we certainly can do that. And now obviously we're coming up, the operating budget and CIP, all that's coming up, you know, before you know it anyway. So what's our timeline, Mark, on, I mean, what do we have coming up for our next meeting? Is there anything in particular for November 10th?
We're gonna have all the submissions for the capital program are due November 3rd. Whether or not we have them all by then or not, I'm sure we might have a request from a couple of our larger departments for a few more days. So I don't think we'll have all the submissions ready for your next meeting. But what I could do for the next meeting is I could start reviewing items like the capital trust funds cash flow analysis to give you a sense as to what we're looking at for the next 5 years for a capital program. So we can start talking about things like that.
Okay.
But before we go there, I just had one question for the committee. I know you met with Lynn Plant to talk about ways to market or perhaps publish or get the word out about the report you just approved tonight. And I'm not, you know, I was going to distribute that tomorrow to the council, department heads, get it up on the town's website. Did you have other ways of disseminating or distributing this information to the community? Somebody want to do a town talk with us? Come on and talk about the report and what CFAC does with Channel 18.
Yeah, no, I think that certainly would be a good thing to do if we can schedule that. I don't know, Jeremy, were you going to do something
Yeah.
at the school or?
So I have a list and I'll send it out. I was kind of waiting to see our final one, but now that we've finalized it, I have a proposal just of how to break down the report into a separate set of social media posts. And I will certainly invite anyone that is interested or willing to perhaps include their faces and voices into some videos, just as a way to break this down. So I'll send it out in the next day and just get some feedback. But I'd love to certainly have some discussion next meeting about the potential use of social media in disseminating this information and getting some engagement.
Okay.
And then Chris and I are gonna, if you remember, we took an assignment after the report was done to come up with a 1-page document. So we'll be working on that and provide that to you, but there's no reason to hold up anything or wait. It's gonna be, we'll do it posthumously, if you will.
Yeah, just let me know, you know, when you have it written up and we can review it at a meeting, you know, whenever you're ready.
And to Mark's question about the town cable channel. And Chris, I would nominate you to be the spokesperson for the committee. Mark, the format is what, a 30-minute interview by somebody? How would we
I
go
don't
about
think it's that long. It's maybe like 10
10
minutes.
minutes?
And we usually draft up, make a list of questions ahead of time for you to take a look at, so you're prepared
Right.
to.
So I think that would be helpful if we could do that pretty soon. If Chris has time to do that pretty soon, we can make you a TV star, Chris, and help as Jeremy is thinking about other ways to get our message out. That would be helpful as well.
If that's a motion, I'll second it.
I don't know if we need to be formal about it, but I'm happy to
Okay.
do it if nobody else wants to. So just let me know, Mark, if they want to schedule a town talk.
I will. Thank you, Chris.
Happy to do that. So yeah, do we want to item on our next agenda about social media type stuff? Jeremy's going to send that. We can discuss it at the next meeting. Does that work for everyone?
That sounds good.
Okay. All right. Anything else from you, Mark?
No, Jeremy, could you just send me a brief agenda item topic on that, what you want to call that? I'll add it to the agenda. Thank you.
You got it.
Right. And Mark, the two questions, the seasonal communities designation, I think you said by the end of this calendar year, the state will come up with its criteria, and then what happens next? Does town council have to vote? What goes on after that?
I believe it requires a local acceptance. So yeah. So
Okay.
but we'll see. We'll see what they approve and what they.
Okay.
So not
Okay.
sure.
And then my other question has to do with and I'm forgetting the name of it, but the changes that would allow us to increase the meals tax and the short-term rentals tax. What is that what is that
Municipal
referred as?
Empowerment Act.
Yeah, what is the status of that?
It's a committee right now.
All right.
So there's two committee. I forgot the name of the two committees that are looking at it, and it hasn't been
Mhm.
referred yet to, I believe, a third committee, which is
Mhm.
I think called the Revenue Committee. But yeah, so it's under committee review. So maybe sometime this fiscal year we'll have some movement on that as well.
Right. I see Councilor Ludke's still with us. Anything from town council you want us to know? Not hearing anything.
No, I'm
Okay.
sorry. I just I'm on my iPhone trying to do this. No,
That's all right.
nothing. I think it's been a really good discussion tonight. It was nice to see Mark's presentation a second time. It's really important, the residential exemption. I'm always shocked when he shows the towns that haven't done it. Since the seasonal communities, you can go up to 50%. I mean, it's a significant tool, and to think that we're among the leaders. And I always remind people, we didn't think of it. It was the citizens that brought it forward. It was a citizens petition. So it's a powerful tool, and it's to be considered very seriously and wisely. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. If there's nothing else, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move.
Second,
Moved and seconded. Can we get a roll call?
Hector Gunther,
Yes.
Tom Keene,
Yes.
Chris King,
Yes.
Chris Lausanne,
Yes.
Jim Sproul,
Yes.
Frank Ward,
Yes.
Lillian Wu,
yes.
and I am a yes.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Thank